Folks, I hope you're okay. I want to introduce you to a scholar called William Mitchell Ramsay. He is a great scholar. He lived from 1851 to 1939. Um, there's no record of him becoming a Christian. However, he was quite an amazing guy because basically German scholarship 150 years ago ruled the whole academic world. And the scholarship basically was saying that the New Testament was produced in the second century, it wasn't produced by the apostles or the companions. They were late pieces of literature, edited, and they weren't didn't have much historical value. Anyhow, Sir William Mitchell Ramsay, who was an eminent archaeologist, um, decided to turn his attention. He was an expert in the Greco-Roman ancient literature and archaeology. Decided to turn his attention to the Book of Acts, and to his amazement, he found that the Book of Acts was very accurate in its historical reliability. So that led William Sir William Mitchell Ramsay, to begin to write a number of books on Paul and Luke and the Book of Acts and Paul's letters. And he didn't become, I don't think he became a Christian. He could have, but we don't have any information on that. However, he was an absolute defender of the accuracy of Luke's writings. Because he wasn't a Christian, he didn't necessarily believe in inerrancy or anything like that, but he is a scholar that wrote a lot of good literature on the Book of Acts and Paul's letters. The reason being, he was so honest. He would just look at things in the historical context. So it's very worth reading his life and also getting hold of his books. I've got his books. I'm beginning to read through his books, so I thought I'd share it with you. So William Ramsay, born 15th March 1851, died 20th of April 1939, was a British archaeologist and New Testament scholar. He was the foremost authority of his day on the history of Asia Minor and a leading scholar in the study of the New Testament. Ramsay was educated in the Tübingen School of Thought, founded by F.C. Bauer, which doubted the reliability of the New Testament. But his extensive archaeological and historical studies convinced him of the New Testament's historical accuracy. From the post of Professor of Classical Art and Architecture at Oxford, he was appointed Regius Professor of Humanity at Aberdeen. Knighted in 1906 to mark his distinguished service to the world of scholarship, Ramsay also gained 3 honorary fellowships from Oxford colleges, 9 honorary doctorates from British, continental, and North American universities, and became an honorary member of almost every association devoted to archaeology and historical research. At the end of his career, he became involved in Christian apologetics, which combined with his argumentative and caustic tendencies, ultimately harmed his reputation among scholars. He died at his home in Bournemouth on the 20th of April, 1939. The issue there is because he wrote these fantastic scholarly books and then he turned his attention in defending Christianity. Again, we don't know whether what how that worked out in his faith. Did he put his faith in Christ as Lord and Savior? We don't know, but he was defending Christianity in apologetics, like the accuracy of Luke, for example. Um, but he had this immense ability as a historian, an archaeologist, to look at things in historical context. And when he did that, he completely smashed this higher critical scholarship of Germany, because he was saying, no, the New Testament is from the first century. Um, Ramsay was born in Glasgow, Scotland, the youngest son of a third generation lawyer. Thomas Ramsay and his wife, Jane Mitchell, daughter of William Mitchell. His father died when he was 6 years old, and the family moved from the city to the family home in the country district near Alloa. The help of his older brother and his maternal uncle, Andrew Mitchell of Alloa, made it possible for him to receive an education at the gymnasium in Old Aberdeen. Other relatives included Mary Ramsay and Agnes Margaret Ramsay, who contributed photographs and illustrations in Ramsay's later work, The Letters to the Seven Churches. Ramsay studied at the University of Aberdeen, where he achieved high distinction. He then won a scholarship to St John's College, Oxford, where he obtained a first class in classical moderations in 1874 and other scholarly acumen. He also studied Sanskrit under the scholar Theodore Benfrey at Göttingen. In 1880, Ramsay received an Oxford studentship of travel and research in Greece. Now, this scholar, this Sanskrit scholar, he also studied Sanskrit under the scholar Theodore Benfrey at Göttingen. This scholar taught Ramsay to look at ancient literature in their context, and this was to serve him in his future career as a brilliant academic in Greco-Roman history. So he learnt a lot from this Sanskrit scholar, Theodore Benfrey, and how to look at ancient text. And Ramsay, as a lecturer and a scholar himself, trained his students to be thorough in their historical investigations when they're looking at ancient literature. In 1880, Ramsay received an Oxford studentship for travel and research in Greece. And at Smyrna, he met Sir C. Wilson, the British Consul General in Anatolia, who advised him on inland areas suitable for exploration, and made two long journeys with him in 1881 and 1882. Ramsay travelled widely in Asia Minor, rapidly became the recognised authority on all matters relating to the district associated with St. Paul's missionary journey on Christianity on the Roman Empire. Greece and Turkey remained the focus of Ramsay's research to the remainder of his academic career. In November 1881, he discovered two of the most important Phrygian monuments, the rock tombs of Aslantis, Lionstone, and the Snake Stone, located close to the city centre of Afron. In 1883, he discovered the world's oldest complete piece of music, the Silico Epitaph. In 1890, he discovered inscriptions in an unknown Anatolian language, the Pisidian, a description of which he published in 1895. He was known for his expertise in the historic geography and topography of Asia Minor and of its political, social, cultural, and religious history. After becoming a Fellow of Exeter College, Oxford, in 1882, from 1885 to 1886, Ramsay held the newly created Lincoln Professor of Classical Archaeology and Art at Oxford and became a Fellow of Lincoln College, Honorary Fellow in 1898. In 1886, Ramsay was appointed Regius Professor of Humanity at the University of Aberdeen and remained affiliated with Aberdeen until his retirement in 1911. I want to just come back a little bit. If you notice there, he was known for his expertise in the historic geography and topography of Asia Minor and of its political, social, cultural, and religious history. This is quintessential Ramsay. Why? What do I mean? Ramsay believed that you couldn't really be a historian, and you definitely couldn't be looking at ancient text unless you had a grasp of the culture of the time, particularly in the geography and topography of the area. So if you're looking at an ancient document, you need to go to the area where it came from or it's writing about and look at the topography and the way the land is and the archaeological data that you can find before you go into the text so that you've got a background for studying the text. He was very, very strong on this, and he trained his students who became great classical scholars themselves in this methodology. And this gives you the strength and the timelessness of Ramsay's work, because Ramsay's work, when he's writing about Paul or Luke, he's done massive research on the geography and topography of Asia Minor. And so when he's writing about Luke, when he's writing about Paul, he has this vast amount of historical knowledge that he brings to bear, and it gives his writings a richness that and a timelessness that wouldn't be in most books. Perspective on biblical history. When Ramsay first traveled to Asia Minor, the locations of many of the cities in the Book of Acts were not known. Later in life, Ramsay stated, further studies showed that the book could bear the most minute scrutiny as an authority for the facts of the Aegean world, and that it was written with such judgment, skill, and art and perception of truth to be a model of historical statement. Also stating that one may press the words of Luke in a degree beyond any other historians. Specifically, Ramsay studied Asia Minor led him to accept the trustworthiness of Luke's account in the book of Acts. He wrote, I am fairly I may fairly claim to have entered on this investigation without any prejudice in favour of the conclusion, which I shall now attempt to justify to the reader. On the contrary, I began with a mind unfavourable to it, for the ingenuity and apparent completeness of the Tübingen theory had at some time quite convinced me. It did not lie then in my line of life to investigate the subject minutely, but more recently I find myself often brought in contact with the Book of Acts as an authority for the topography, antiquities, and society of Asia Minor. It was gradually borne in on me that in various details the narrative showed marvelous truth. Regarding the authentic authorship of Paul's epistles, Ramsay also concluded that all 13 New Testament letters ostensibly written by Paul were in fact authentic. I mean that's massive. This is a guy who overturned German scholarship that was critical of the Bible. The Tübingen school was very, very critical of Paul's letters, saying they're not of Paul, and the Book of Acts is not historical. And yet Ramsay comes along more objective, steeped in historical and archaeological information, says no, the books are accurate. Luke is accurate. Paul wrote these letters. Massive, massive. So he got honorary degrees. Ramsay is recognized as an important scholar in the archaeology of Asia Minor, as well as the study of the New Testament, mainly from his 19th century work. W. Ward Gascoigne listed three significant contributions of his to biblical studies: his conclusion of the reliability of the accuracy of Luke and Acts, his identification of Galatians with the Christians of Derbe, Lasteria, Iconium, and his emphasis on the historical context of the New Testament. Now, he was persuaded by William Robertson Nicoll to write some apologetic works, which the scholarly world frowned upon, but he did some good work. Ramsay's wife, Agnes, accompanied him in many of his journeys. Lady Ramsay's granddaughter of Andrew Marshall was an author in her own right. Now, here are the works of Ramsay. 1890, The Historical Geography of Asia Minor. The Church in the Roman Empire, AD 170. St. Paul the Traveller, the Roman Citizen. The Cities and Bishoprics of Phrygia, 2 volumes. Recent research in Bible lands, its progress and results. Impressions of Turkey during 12 years wandering. Was Christ born at Bethlehem? The study and the credibility of Luke. The historical commentary on St. Paul's epistle to the Galatians. The bearing recent discovery on the trustworthiness of the New Testament. The education of Christ. Pictures of the Apostolic Church. Studies in the Book of Acts. The Church in the Roman Empire, 1893. A historical commentary on the epistle to the Corinthians. the letters of the seven churches, Asia and their plan in etc. Pauline and other studies in early church history. Cities of St. Paul, their influence on his life and thought. Luke the physician and other studies in the history of religion. The revolution in Constantinople and Turkey. 1001 churches. The 1001 churches, picture of the apostolic church, its life and teaching. The first Christian century, notes and Dr. Maffat's introduction to the literary New Testament. Historical commentary on pastoral epistles, sketches in the religious antiquities of Asia Minor, the imperial peace and ideal in European history, the teaching of Paul in terms of the present day, recent research in New Testament, the making of a university, what we have to learn from educational ideals in America. The intermixture of races in Asia Minor, some causes and effects. And he wrote quite a lot of articles for the Hastings Dictionary of the Bible. So, in terms of scholarship, there's a whole fruitful bowl, a fruitful tree of scholarship there for you to read, for those interested in scholarship of the New Testament. Dive into his work. You can get all of his work mainly free on Google Archive. Download them, begin to read them. If you're interested in the scholarship of the New Testament, you've got to. I'm reading one on Paul at the moment, and you're going to be enriched. You're going to be blessed, and you're going to be invigorated. You won't agree with everything Ramsay says, but I'm just encouraging you in this to read his works and his life. Okay, God bless you and take care. Okay, so sometimes we do Bible teaching, apologetics, things like that, but this is like to encourage you to read some works, and I'd encourage you to read William Mitchell Ramsay. You're going to be blessed. Take care.